Today we're going to be learning Ketubot, Daf Mem Aleph, and with that we will finish also the third chapter of Masechet Ketubot. This month's learning is sponsored by the Kessler, Wokenfeld, and Grossman families in loving memory of Mia Rose Bat Matan Yehoshua Ve'ilana Malka. Shem Natan v'Hashem Lakach Yehi Shem Hashem Vora. Okay, we're going to get started now with the top of our page. Before we go actually into our daf, I want to just point out one thing. We talked yesterday about this Mishnah. Okay, I mentioned that the Mishnah seems a little bit out of order. The Yitomash and Nitarsav and Nitgarsha, and why the order of the Mishnayot is first we have this Machloket Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yossi Aglili about Nitarsav and Nitgarsha, a woman who's betrothed and then divorced. Then we move on to what are the differences between a rape and a seduction. Then we have this Yitomash and Nitarsav and Nitgarsha, which sounds more like the previous Mishnah. And Rabbi Elazar there says, Ha'ones chayav and mefateh patul. The one who rapes is chayav, the one who seduces is exempt. And then we get back to the previous Mishnah mentioned Boshet and Pgam when it talked about the differences. And then it starts saying, what is Boshet? What is Pgam? How do you evaluate? So I looked at the Melechet Shlomo, and he says, his commentary on the Mishnah, he says specifically that the difference between the ones and the mefateh is, here we have another difference between them. Rabbi Elazar says that there's a difference between the ones and the mefateh, specifically about this issue on the Yitomash, Nitarsav, and Nitgarsha. And because of that, that's exactly why we have this. Just want to check one thing that I'm right about this. One second. Sorry. Okay. So, okay. I was just checking that I had it right. Who said it? Yes, it was the Melechet Shlomo. So he basically says that that's the difference here. The difference is that it's the reason why it's here is because it's another difference between the ones and the mefateh. So he's adding onto the list before they get into Boshet and Pgam, he's adding to the list another difference between them. So that's why it actually makes a lot of sense according to his interpretation. Okay, now we're going to go on to Daf Mem Aleph, starting with the Mishnah. Ha'omer pititi et bito shel ploni. Okay, before I even explain what this means, I want to tell you one really important halacha, which is the basis for this Mishnah. Our Mishnah is discussing, we've been talking about knas and mammon and the differences between them. So today we're going to really attack this issue of knas and a bunch of halachic differences between knas and mammon. So knas has a unique halacha, that since it's a fine, a penalty, right, where it's not a financial payment, if you come forward and admit that you did something wrong, you actually are exempt from the penalty. Okay, this could be right various reasons. Maybe a penalty is for someone who does something wrong. If you come up forward and you admit, so we'll exempt you from that, right? There's all sorts of cases where we're lenient to someone if they make a confession. Whereas if it's monetary damage that you caused and you have to pay monetary compensation, right, you come forward and say, I stole your computer. So what, we're not going to make you return the computer? Of course we're going to make you return the computer. But when it comes to Geneva and the Torah, there's kefel, there's double, so the double part we won't make you pay. But of course you have to pay the amount. So confessions don't, right? You're basically, it's called modeh biknas patur. If you're modeh, you admit and you confess, and it's knas. And again, this means we don't know about it from any other source other than you coming forward and telling us, confessing, then you're going to be exempt. So the Mishnah says, what if you come forward and say, Patiti et bito shel ploni, I seduced the daughter of so-and-so. Mishalem boshet upgam al piatzmo. Boshet and pgam, we said, were monetary payments, so that he has to pay. Those are the parts of the damages as he causes. Ve'ein mishalem knas, but he doesn't pay the knas part, the 50 shkalim, right, which is the 200 zuz. Ha'omer ganavti. Mishalem et hakeren al piatzmo. Ve'ein mishalem tashlumei kefel v'tashlumei 4 ו-5. So again, like I mentioned before, if you say I stole, you pay the value of the item itself, but you don't pay the double or the times 4 or 5, like we saw in if you stole and sold, right? That was an animal. If you stole it and then you slaughtered it, tabach, and then you sold it, so then you would have to pay the 4 or 5, but you wouldn't have to do that if you come forward and admit. Hemit shori et ploni, o shoro shel ploni, my shor killed a person, or a shore of another person, or killed an ox of another person, so that you have to pay. That's damages. But hemit shori avdo shel ploni. But if it killed the slave of someone, we already learned this, and I'll read you today the psukim inside. Okay, it says Im eved yigach hashul, if he kills a slave, o ama, or a maid servant, kesef 30 shkalim yitain ladonav asher yisakel. Now we talked about this, that this 30 shkalim that you have to pay, that you pay to the owner of the slave. That 30 shkalim is a flat rate. It's a knas. So because of that, you wouldn't have to pay eno meshalem al pi atzmo. Za klal, here's the rule. Kol meshalem yeter ama shezik, eno meshalem al pi atzmo. Anytime where you pay more than the damage you caused, okay, which works very well for the Tashlumei Kefel or Arba Chamisha, that's more than what you cost. Okay, by Pitoy, it's also more because you're paying in addition to the Boshet and the Gam, right? You're also paying more. Okay, we're going to talk later about what about a case where it's less. Maybe sometimes there's Knas that's less, and that's going to be a big debate coming up later in the Gemara today. Before I move on, I want to tell you a few things. One is, or maybe just one, I don't know, we'll see. I'm trying to think of what's going on in my head right now, but why don't you pay Knas? Where is this learned from? So this is derived from a pasuk in Shemot, also in that chapter. So it's in the next chapter, actually. This was Kaf Aleph, where it talks about the damages caused to the ox causes. Then it says, what if you steal from somebody else? And then it says in chapter 22, verse 8, a kol dvar pesha on all kinds of misdoings. Ashor, chamor, asel, sama, kol aveda asher yomar kiuseh. Okay, if there's some issue of monetary, you stole something of someone's. Ad Elohim yavod dvar shnehem. Now, Elohim usually means God here, and in a lot of places, Elohim actually means to the judges. The issue between the fight between these two people will go before the judges. Asher shi'un Elohim, and when the judges make one into the bad guy, right, that he did this wrong, Yishalem shnaim l're'ehu, he has to pay double. So if the court convicts you, you have to pay double. Rashi explains here, based on a Gemara in Bava Kama, that's the source for Modeh B'Knas Patul, because only if the Beit Din says Prat l'marshiat atzmo, if you look in the second, third line in Rashi, Nafkalan de Modeh B'Knas mi asher yoshiun Elohim, that comes to exclude marshiat atzmo, someone instead of the court convicting him, he came forward and convicted himself. So he will not have to pay the Knas because only you pay the double if you're shi'un Elohim. Okay, that's where it's derived. Okay, the other psukim I wanted to show you, I'm going to show you as we go on. A lot starting from here and on, for most of the stuff, it's going to be like a shiur in Bava Kama. Okay, we're going kind of out of our topic and going to all sorts of sugyot in Bava Kama. Okay, I'm just checking one quick thing. Okay, now Gemara starts off before we get to Bava Kama and says, "V'lidei anasti." Why doesn't it say "Haomer anasti et biti shel ploni"? If I said I raped someone, there's also a difference between the boshep gam and sal versus the knat. And then again, it would be, he doesn't pay the knas, but he does pay the rest. So why didn't it say that? Well, Gemara answers lo mebaya kama. Lo mebaya means it's the kind of structure that it didn't need to say this because it's obvious, but it said something that was less obvious. In other words, between onus and pitoy, onus was the more obvious case, so it didn't even need to mention it. So let's read inside how this works. Lo mebaya anasti de lo kapagim la. All along we've been saying it is pogem, right? It's a bit of ruining her life, right? He claims I raped you. It's pretty bad for the woman, right? She's a rape victim. However, in fact, I had a listener who pointed this out to me that you have to be very careful when you say, right, that she is stigmatized by the rape, because she's really not, because it's really, right, it's his problem. She was just a victim. She's not stigmatized at all. And in fact, here the Gemara supports that very much so and says, listen, now, of course you have to say there's pagam, okay, which is, right, degradation, because otherwise he wouldn't be paying pagam. So Rashi says it's all relative. It's less degrading for the woman to say she was raped than it is to say she was seduced. Because she was seduced, that means she was a willing participant. She shouldn't have been doing that, right? So they're now going to say the following. We didn't need to say ones, lo kapagim la, where now here this gets to things we saw in the beginning of the Masechet, which is, how do we know to believe somebody? And can we, if somebody comes forward with a confession and it messes up other people as well, are they believed? So you didn't need to say by anasti, where he didn't make her look bad, or at least not relative to her being seduced. Forget about the knas. So yes, he's exempt from the knas, but he does have to pay the boshet pagam because he admitted it and he caused financial damage. So we're going to believe him. Okay. Obviously, in that case, now let's fill in the blank. There was no harm done by his admission, maybe a little bit because now she's a rape victim, but theoretically, he didn't make her look bad. Now, yes, he did cause her to be considered now a be'ula, right? She's considered not a virgin by his admission, but doesn't make her look as bad as it does that to say she was seduced and she was a willing participant, that looks bad. So in that case, we make him pay the bosher upgam ava patiti de kapagimla. But if he comes forward and he says, I seduced her, where he's actually making her look pretty bad too, maybe we wouldn't make him pay the bosher upgam. Why? This is very interesting. Because we'd say, if we make him pay the bosher upgam, everyone's going to look differently at this woman. Why were you seduced by this man? And that's not going to be good. So maybe we should basically exempt him from the payment so that she won't look bad, because it will basically, by exempting him, we're basically saying, we don't believe what you say, which basically means she's fine. Okay. So lo kolemenu she'if gon bitoshel, right, because lo kolemenu she'if gon bitoshel ploni, we shouldn't just let him so easily mess up. Like he could just admit that to mess somebody up. So therefore, maybe we don't want to accept his testimony at all. But that's why the Mishnah specifically brings this case and says, no, even in Pitoy, even when he's messing her up as well and making her look bad, he still has to pay the bosher upgam. We're going to make him pay based on his admission because those are mamon rather than knas. Okay, right? That's a financial payment. Basically, number one, we are going to believe. We're going to believe him and therefore make him pay. Now, but only make him pay the mamon, not the knas. That's a side point. Okay, so now Amalei Rav Papa Labai. Papa's now going to ask Abai all these questions. Nichala ledida mai. What if she would rather take the money? 1 second, just check one thing. Nichala ledida. One second. Just got confused by one thing. Oh, that's why I skipped something. I knew something didn't make sense. Okay, I skipped a line. Now I understand why something wasn't making sense. Matnitin deloki haitan. So the Mishnah is not like the following Tana. What we just suggested that said is not true. Well, there's a Tana who disagrees with this. Tanya Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda Omer Mishum Rabbi Shimon. Okay, Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda quoted the other Rabbi Shimon is saying, and that's why I see now. I read that line before by accident. That line, lo kol imenu, is a mistake. I read it before and I misread it. Okay, forget that I said that line and let's just move forward. So he said, even the bosher upgam eno mishalem al piatzmo, we don't accept his testimony even regarding the bosher upgam because lo kol imenu she'if gon bitoshel ploni. Before I asked as a question because I thought I read it in the wrong place, explaining our Mishnah. But lo kolimenu she'if gon bitoshel ploni, we are not allowing this person to destroy the name of this girl. Okay, Rabbi Shimon totally disagrees with our Mishnah and says, no way, no how are we going to accept his testimony about this woman to mess her up? We don't want to. No, he's going to pay nothing, and that way her name won't be ruined. Okay, so we have these two different approaches. So now comes Rav Papa and asks Abaye on Rabbi Shimon's opinion. It says, what if nichala ledida mai? What if, okay, right, start our slew of what if questions. What if she preferred to get the money, according to Rabbi Shimon? Rabbi Shimon says, right, we don't want him to destroy her name. What if she doesn't care? What if she wants the money? What if she says, listen, I'd rather get the money. I don't care that my name is ruined. Well, to which the Gemara says, she might not care about her name, but her father. This is, again, in their society, even nowadays, but imagine even the more so in their society. Right? It was really an embarrassment to the father, to the whole family, that this would happen. Right? You see this in some countries where, a woman will do something wrong and it's this terrible tragedy, right? Do some sexual behavior, something, it'll be this horrible tragedy for the entire family. So maybe the father won't, maybe it's not good for him. That's why we don't allow. Well, what if the father doesn't care? The father would rather get the money. As I said before, this affects the whole family. This isn't just the father. It affects the brothers. It affects the uncles. People start talking about this family. The woman sleeps around. Really, really serious. So then they say, okay, well, What if the whole family doesn't care? To which the Gemara has a fascinating answer. There's no way there isn't someone abroad. This is just an exaggerated way of saying it's not possible that nobody cares. There's got to be someone who really cares, especially, by the way, all these other family members are affected by it, and they're not the ones getting the money, the financial payment. So it's not possible that they'd rather the girl, the father get paid the money and the girl's name get, her reputation gets smeared, because it really affects her whole broader family. And here they even say, right, even family that's abroad, people are going to be talking about. It's a fascinating thing. And again, understood in their culture, which again is harder for us to understand, but there are cultures today that still live that way. So, you can read about them and see that there are cultures that still live in this way. If the woman does something, it's this huge, embarrassing, humiliating thing for the entire broader family. So in the end, like they say, if this is where Rabbi Shimon holds, right, it's not going to be in any case, even if they're willing to say, I'd rather have the money, they don't really have a choice about it. Next case. Here we're going to start with all the Bava Kama stuff. Okay, so now we're getting into other cases of Knas, and from there the Gemara is going to jump into something else entirely, which is a big debate about Chatzi Nezek. What's Chatzi Nezek? So, famous psukim about a shor mu'ad and a shor tam. Okay, there's a shor, if I have an ox who's mine, and he's never done any. Now, shor, we assume an ox does certain damages. Okay, when we get to Bava Kama, we'll learn all this. There's shein and regel. Shein is teeth, right? They eat things. And regel is trample on things, right? They don't look down and say, oh, I'm not going to trample on that. So if a shor does any of those are expected damages. But keren, which is goring with his horns, is not anticipated. We don't think that a shor walks on the street and just randomly gores a person or another animal. However, that being said, if a shor causes damage that comes under the category of typical damage, shein regel, we're going to say the shor has to pay full damages. But if it's atypical damages, like goring someone else, then the Torah differentiates between the first and second time and third time. And then after he's done it already 3 times, the shor is called a shor mu'ad, meaning he's been warned. Okay, the owner has to watch this animal because, right, the animal is already expected to have this kind of tendency toward this behavior. So what are the differences of halacha? The main difference is a shor tam, which is the shor before it happens 3 times, pays only half damages when he gores. After 3 times, he now has to pay full damages. So the big question is this half damage, the half amount that you pay, the half damages, is that nezeh? Is it a mammon, a financial payment that you're compensating for half of the damages, just not all of them? Or is it that you're really not liable at all, but we're going to make you pay half? That's a knas. That's just a penalty. So that's what we're going to see right now. It was said, meaning introduction to a machloka between a moraim. Palganizka, half damages. Rav Papa Amal, Palganizka mamona. Rav Papa says it's mamon. Rav Huna Berleita Rav Yoshua Amal, Palganizka knas. It's a knas, it's a penalty. So now we're going to see their explanations. Rav Papa Amar, Palganizka mamona, kasaval, as he holds, stam shvarim, lav bechezkat shimor kaime. Regular shvarim are not necessarily protected, okay? They're not the kind of things that we anticipate that you need to protect. And therefore, bidinhu de mishalim, I'm sorry, lav bechezkat shimor kaime, my mistake. They're not, just have to plug in my computer 1 second. They're not, where's my plug? It's not there. Apologies. Just realized it wasn't plugged in. Okay. So Rav Papa says that Palganizkas mamona, why? Shvarim are not animals that we're not, 1 second, La b'chezkat shimor kaime. They're not animals that are normally protected, meaning they're wild, they're crazy, they could do anything. Therefore, bidinu de mashalim kule, really, you should have to pay full damages because they could just gore anybody on the street. But the Torah had pity on us and said, Akati lo'iyai Torah, well, Yeshua hadn't yet done it. It's like saying, right, we'll give you a chance or two. It hasn't been warned yet, so we'll let you get away with it. But that really means that you should be paying full damages. The Torah just said, well, we'll only make you pay half. Rav Huna b'reit Rav Yoshua Amal, Palganizka Knasa. He thinks it's Knas. Why? Kasava, Shtam Shvarim b'chizkat Shimur Kaimei. Most Shvarim have their own inner protection. They protect themselves, right? They are not really anticipated to gore other people. And therefore, Bedinu Delo L'Shalim Klal. Really, theoretically, you shouldn't have to pay at all. But the Torah said, we're going to penalize. Because we want you to watch over your shore. Okay, so basically we're going to say, right, this is two sides of the same coin. That's, do we assume that they have a tendency to this, in which case, but we're going to exempt you, and that's mama. Or do we say, no, they don't really have a tendency, but we're going to make you pay because we really want you to protect your animal, even though, there's a small chance something might happen in that way. Well, you really should protect. And that's why we say, if it happens, you have to pay half damages, and then it's just a penalty. So these are two different ways of looking at it. Now we have a siman for what's upcoming. 4 sources, 4 mishnayot, 3 from Baba Kama and 1 from our Mishnah, that we're going to try to use to prove that chatzi nezek is mama. Okay, let's see if we're successful. Siman hizik, ma, behemit, kla. Okay, that's just words that are supposed to be a mnemonic to remember. We don't need a mnemonic. We have this all in front of us. Tanan. They use these mnemonics when things were more were passed over orally. Tanan. Hanizak v'hamazik b'tashlumin. The one who's damaged and the one whose ox damaged are together in the payment. Okay, they each pay part. So what does this mean? Well, bishlam alamand amar palgan is kamamona. Hainu tishayach nizak b'tashlumin. If you say that really I should be paying the whole thing, but I'm not paying the whole thing because the Torah had pity on me, right? That I didn't, right? Because I really should have paid because my shore really is wild, probably is wild. I should have to pay the whole thing. The Torah said, well, since it's never happened before, we'll exempt you from half. That means that really I should have paid 100. So I paid 50. And the nizak, the one who I damaged, let's say your ox, you basically lost 50 on the deal. So both of us share in the payment because you don't get your 50. That's a sharing in the payment. That would only work if it's mama. Ela lamanda amar palgan is kaknasa, hashtalav didei kashakel betashlumin ite. But if I really owe you nothing and I gave you 50 out of, again, not the kindness of my heart, but because the Torah said I have to, but basically you don't even deserve that 50 because really I wasn't expected to watch my shore at all, then, well, you didn't pay anything toward it because you're just getting 50. I mean, it's true you lost, but it wouldn't be, you're not deserving of more than 50. So it can't be knas. Well, the Gemara is going to reject this as a proof because the Gemara is going to say you totally misunderstood what this Mishnah is talking about. Lo nitzracha ela lebchat nevela. We're going to learn a whole bunch of halachot today about oxes goring other oxes. Now, when my ox gored your ox, I'm going to keep using that example. You ended up with a dead ox. Now that dead ox has value. That's an nevela, the dead animal. You can go sell that in the shuk. You can take the skin, right, the hide. You can do things with it. So let's say I caused 100 shekels worth of damage. It's the easiest case to take. Okay, your shore was worth 100. And forget how much I caused. Forget that. I just said that wrong. Your ox is worth 100. So until now, we thought that means I pay 50 because half damages. But it's not really true. There's the nevela. You have, let's say, the ox is worth, the dead one is worth 20 shekels. So now it was worth 100. Now it's worth 20. The amount of damages is 80. So I pay you half the damages. Okay. But what is a pchat nevela? Pchat means depreciation. Let's say between the time my ox gored your ox and killed it, the nevela then was worth 20, but you didn't sell it yet. And now the nevela goes down in value because it starts to smell. It's not so good anymore. Okay. If it goes down to 10, what happens? It's your loss, not mine. Okay. I still pay half the damages, which is 80 because 100 minus 20. But not 100 minus 10. I only pay 40. I don't pay 45. So that's what it means. Hanizak b'mazik b'tashlumin. You pay a little toward it also because you lose out on the pchat nevela. That's what. To which the Gemara says, pchat nevela tanina. There's a different mishnah that talks about pchat nevela. If you're going to say this mishnah is talking about that, there's no point if there's 2 mishnayot. How do we know that? Well, it says tashlumei nezek. There's damages you have to pay. Milamed shabalim metaplim b'nevela. Okay, they're not giving you the whole thing here, but what they're saying is from here we derive that the Ba'alim, the owners, are in charge of the nevela, meaning you're the owner of that ox that died. The nevela is yours. It has absolutely nothing to do with me, which means the pchat nevela is on you. So we don't need a Mishnah. If that Mishnah seems to indicate the same thing, we wouldn't need to say this Mishnah is talking about pchat nevela, to which the Gemara says, utzricha. No, you need them both. Why? I'm sorry. Chada b'tam, chada b'muad. One of them is referring to a short tam, and one of them is referring to a short muad. In other words, the pchat nevela has nothing to do with full damages or half damages. It has to do with any damages, right? It's just a matter of, am I paying half, am I paying full? But it's obviously relevant when we assess how much damage was done. And if you're going to pay full damages, then it would have been 80. If it's half, it's going to be 40. So one Mishnah was referring to that, and one, a muad, where you pay full, and one was referring to half, when it was a tam. So why do you need both, though? Isn't it? Obviously, it's the same thing. Well, no, because stricha, you need them both. Yes, we need tam. If we only had in a case of a short tam, you would have said the reason why I'm not responsible as the one who caused the damage to take care of the pchat nevela was because mishum da'akati lo yayid, because in the end, my shore was never really worn. So, right, we're not going to make me pay extra. We're going to be lenient on me, and the pchat nevela is on you. But if it's a muad, I should have been careful. Maybe I do have to take care of the pchat nevela, the depreciation of that animal in the meantime, and I do have to cover the loss. And likewise, you could say you could say the exact reverse logic. If you have muad, you could say, well, that's because you're paying full damages, so we won't make you also pay the extra of the depreciation. But tam, where you're only paying half damages, maybe you do need to cover that because you're already not paying as much as you should be. Tzricha. So that's why you need both. In any case, this all comes to disprove this is a proof that it's mammon, because maybe the source is not even talking about chatzi nezek as mammon or knas at all, and it's talking about the pchat nevela. Okay, so first source out the window. Second source, Tashma. Ma bein tam lemuad. Another Mishnah in Bava Kama. What's the difference between tam and muad? Shatam mishalem chatzi nezek migufo, umuad mishalem nezek shalem min aliyah. So the chatzi nezek shalem is very easy, right? Tam pays half, and the muad pays full. But what's this mina aliyah, and what's this chatzi nezek migufo? Well, let's say my shore gored yours. Now, my shore was a cheap shore, okay, not a very expensive one. It only cost 100 shekels. But your shore was worth 1,000 shekels. Okay, let's just ignore the nevela right now. Okay, let's just say right now, the amount of damages was 900 shekels. So I'm sorry, it was 1,000 shekels. My mistake. It was 1,000 shekels. Yours worth 1,000, your shore is dead. Okay, forget about the nevela. Okay, let's say we subtracted the nevela, it's 1,000. So now, my shore is worth, so I'm supposed to pay half damages. That's 500. But my shore, my ox, was only worth 100. I don't have to pay any more than my ox is worth. So if my ox is less than half the damages caused to yours, I don't have to pay any more than that. That's what it means, migufo. I only have to pay from the goof of my shore. I don't have to pay more than my shore is worth. Muad pays nezek shalem, full damages, irregardless of what my shore was worth. Okay, if my shore was already worn, we really don't care. I pay the full damages, mina aliyah, from the best of my land. That's a whole different story. We'll get into that in other cases. Below katay. Now, what does this have to do with anything? Well, what's missing here is what's important. What didn't it say? Well, if tam chatzi nezek was knas and nezek shalem is obviously mammon, then why didn't it bring modeh biknas patur and modeh, right? Modeh in a chatzi nezek case. So let's just read it. Shatam v'lo katani. It doesn't say there. Shatam ino mishalem al pi atzmo, mu'ah mishalem al pi atzmo. It didn't say there. The tam doesn't pay if he admits it, whereas the mu'ah does pay if he admits it, because one's knas, one's mammon. So what do you see here? It must be mammon because it didn't list this. To which the Gemara says, oh, no, that's not a good answer. Tana v'shir, you could just say that the Tana left that out. Now, whenever you say the Tana left that out, right, the Tana gives differences, but then sometimes leaves things out. But when we say it leaves things out, you have to say, what else did it leave out? My shear to high shear. What else did it leave off the list? It doesn't make sense. It only left one thing off the list. Must have left more than one thing. What else is off the list? Well, shear chatzi kofer. If you remember, we talked about this before, that if the shore kills a person, then it said, Hashor yisakel, right? That's, we learned shor and iskal. The shore gets stoned. V'gamba alav yumat, and the owner's supposed to die. And I say supposed to because it says, im kofer yushat alav. But If he pays, we put a ransom amount on him, they put a ransom amount on, he could pay his way out. Now, that's if, right, if my shor killed a person. But that's only if, that's in the psukim of the shor mu'ad. In the psukim about the shor tam, it says, Ki yigach shor ish o isha v'met, and they die, stakol yisakel hashor, v'lo yachel epesaro. I'm in Shemot, chapter 21, verse 28. Ubal hashor naki. And in that case, I am exempt. I'm only supposed to die if it's a shor mu'ad. That's what the next pasuk says. Okay, I read out of order, but I read the pasukim about the shor mu'ad first because you knew them already. But it says, Im shor nagachu mitmol shel shom. If he's already done this a few times, and then he kills a person, then you're liable, the death penalty. So now, what do you see here? According to the simple reading, Bala shor naki, he doesn't pay anything. Okay, he's not liable to the death penalty. He doesn't pay chatzi kofer. So here they say, shiur chatzi kofer. This ransom, in the event that they kill someone, was left off the list because it doesn't say shor tam doesn't pay it and the shor mu'ad does. So the Gemara says, no, that's not a good thing to say this was left off the list as well, because imishum chatzi kofer lav shiurehu, that's not necessarily left off, right? I say not necessarily because you'll see. Hamane, starting now on Amabet. Rabbi Yossi Aglili, you could say that source was according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, and that's why they didn't mention it, because what did he hold? Da'amar tam mishalem chatzi kofer. He said that a shor tam pays half the damages. He does. Okay, if your shor tam, my shor tam, let's say, I'm an animal who wasn't warned yet enough times, killed a person, I would have to pay half the value of the kofer. Okay, however, the kofers decide, that's a whole another debate. Anyway, without getting into too many details, he basically, so basically we're back to, okay, so where does that leave us? It got a little bit lost in the back and forth. So let's just go back. That means there isn't another case that they left off the list, which means that maybe this really is a proof. Again, it's not exactly clear. It's not clear cut, but maybe it is a proof that it is mammon, because it didn't mention that it's knas as one of the differences, and we didn't find any other differences. So maybe, or maybe we did, maybe we didn't. It's very inconclusive. Okay. Tashma. Hemit shori et ploni. Another Mishnah Babakam. If my shor killed a person, shorosh ploni, or killed an ox of someone, hareze mishalem al pi atzmo. So he would have to pay the damages by his own admission. That's damages. My lav. Now, what do they say here? My lav bitam. Now, first they assume it must be talking about a short tam. What do you see? If I pay al piatzmo, that means it's mammon, and it's not knas, because if it was knas, I wouldn't have to pay al piatzmo. So the Gemara says, lo, b'muad. No, it must be muad. And then it proves nothing. It's not talking about chatzi nezek, so it doesn't prove anything about our case. To which the Gemara says, wait, if you're saying it's talking about muad, aval bitam mai, so then what would it be if it was a short tam, according to this? So then you're saying you wouldn't pay if you admitted? Well, look at the end of that Mishnah. The Tane Seifa avdoshal ploni, but if it kills avdoshal ploni, eino mishalem al piatzmo. If it kills a slave, then you don't pay it on your own. That's like it says in our Mishnah, right? Because it's knas. Also in that Mishnah it said it. Now, if it was differentiating between mammon and knas, and it was talking about shor mu'ad, and shor tam would pay knas, then what would you expect it to have said in the second part? It should have already, when it started saying, but in this case you do pay knas, it should have also listed not just if you said my shor killed a slave, which we know is knas, it should have also said when we said it does, you have to pay the damages on your own, it's a shor mu'ad. And then it should have continued and said, but if it was a short time, hadn't yet done this a few times, then you wouldn't pay based on your own admission because it's knas. It doesn't say that, so it must not be. So again, this proves that it must be mamo. Okay? To which they say, no, it didn't necessarily have to start talking about, but a short time wouldn't, because kula b'muad kamairi, you could just say that the whole topic of that Mishnah was a shor muad, and it wasn't relating at all to a short time, and that's why when it differentiated within shor muad. The fact they did mention short time, that just wasn't its topic, so you can't prove anything from there. Tashma, fourth and last proof, zehaklal, our Mishnah says this is the rule. How did it define knas? Anytime you pay more damages than you cost. Now, what does that seem to prove? Chatzi nezek, which is less damage than you caused, wouldn't be knas. It would be mamon. Right? If it's less, then you would pay. Basically, that wouldn't be knas. So the Gemara says, no. Lo tema hapachomi mashi zik. Don't say that's the inference here. Ela ema ha kemashi zik mashalem al piatzmo. It says, if you pay more, then you would, right? That would be a knas, and you wouldn't pay that based on your own admission. But if it's exactly the same amount, then you would pay the money, right? Based on your own admission. Exactly. Not to say not if it was less than, only if it was exact. To which the Gemara doesn't like that, though. So what are you saying? But if it's less or more, only if it's exact, it's mamon. But if it's less than or more than, then then it's knas. Well, then it should, the language of the Mishnah should have been, which it's not. Zehaklal, kol she'eino mashalem kimashi zik, eino mashalem al piatzmo. It should have said, anyone who doesn't pay exactly as he damaged, when it doesn't match exactly, well, then it's knas, right? And then you wouldn't pay based on your own admission. And then it would include both that. And that really does seem to indicate that the chatzi nezek is really mamon and not knas, because otherwise the Mishnah would have said less than is also knas. To which the Gemara says, tiyufta, that really is a difficulty. Okay? And it's hard to say that it's knas. The next line now is going to sound strange because we just kind of proved that it's mamon. Gemara says the halacha is palga nizka knasa. Okay, chatzi nezek is knas. Okay. We've already seen, by the way, one nafkamina, as we say, one difference la halacha, which is knas. You won't pay based on your own admission, right? If you come forward and admit, you won't have to pay the knas. That's one important one. Another one we're going to see in a minute or two, which is another one is that in Babylonia, they weren't allowed to demand knas. So that was another big one. That if it's a knas, then the courts in Babylonia weren't able to institute that punishment. Okay, this all has to do with not getting smicha in Babylonia. So they limited their power in certain ways. And one of them was they couldn't collect knasot. Okay, so we'll see that soon. So here they paskin, the chatzi nezek is knas. To which the Gemara says, wait, we just knocked that option out. Now you're going to say it's the halacha? So the Gemara says, and now I'll explain why. Tama mai totav. Why did we knock out? Right? Why did we say it can't be? It's knas. Mishum de lo katane kimashi zik. Right? Because it didn't bring up the case. Right? Because it didn't say the language of exactly the same amount. Right? And it said more than, which seemed to say, but not less than. To which they say the reason why it didn't say kimashi zik is because lo psikale. Because there are some exceptions to that rule. There are cases where you pay less and it's actually mamon. So that's why. More is always knas. Less is sometimes mamon, sometimes knas, and that's why it didn't say so in the Mishnah. And that's why you can still say chatzi nezek here is knas. Now, what is it? What's the case? Again, we're going to learn another halacha from Baba Kama. Kevan deika chatzi nezek tzrorot dilchadagamir de mamonahu mishumachi lo katani. Because there's this one case of chatzi nezek tzrorot. It's a different chatzi nezek. This is tzrorot or rocks, pebbles. Now, the shore we know often kicks things on the ground. So let's say the shore kicked rocks. Right? If the shore basically smashed my bowl, so then it's not the shore's fault. We expect the shore is going to, I'm sorry, it is the shore. It's my fault entirely because I knew my shore is going to trample on things and I should have protected. But let's say my shore kicked some rocks and those rocks went and damaged something. Okay, they broke the glass in your window. That's already indirect damage. But yet it's from the regel, which was expected. So the halacha l'mosh misina, that means there's a tradition that you pay chatzi nezek, you pay half the damages, and the halacha l'mosh misina, the tradition is that it's a mamon payment. Okay, it's paying you back for the damages. It's just you don't have to do half since it's indirect. So there's a case of where it's less and it's not knas, and that's why they didn't want to say this is the general rule because it's not a general rule in all cases. And therefore, you could still say, though, chatzi nezek by short time is actually knas. Chatzi nezek short isn't, and that's why it didn't say. So now the Gemara says, now that you explained to us that chatzi nezek is knas, well, I'm going to tell you the following situation. If this happens, okay, then X. Okay, let's see. If a dog eats a lamb, okay, which is not expected type of damage, more like Karen, right? Like we said, like goring, or shundra, or a cat, it's a gigantic bird, okay, a gigantic rooster, Mishunehu, that's a strange type thing, which would mean it's chatzi nezek. V'lo magbinam beBavel, and you wouldn't be able to demand this in Babylonia because it's knas. Aval zutre, but if it was a small animal, orchehu, that's already expected, umagvina, and you would collect. You would be able to collect the money if that happened to your animal. But some other halachot, itafis, if though, let's say my dog ate your lamb. So you wouldn't be able to demand it if we were living in Babylonia. But if you took the money from me, itafas, lo mafkina mine, the courts wouldn't force you to return the money to me because it is, as we say, magia, right? You should be able to collect that. Vi amar, and in addition, if you said, forget that you took the money, you didn't take it from me. Ikbu li zimna la'eretz Yisrael. I'm ordering you to go to a court in Israel, and I don't go. Right? You can force me to do it. You can say, I insist that we set up a date for a court in Israel because I want to get my kinas. You can force me to come. Vilo azil, and if I don't come, mishamtinale, we put me in excommunication until I listen to that court order. To which the Gemara says, by the way, whether you force me to come to Israel, you don't force me to come to Israel, you put me in excommunication anyway for a different reason. Why is that? Here you see where the Gemara really didn't like dogs, okay? Because we say to me, we're going to excommunicate me until I get rid of my dog. I got to kill that dog because that's clearly a killer dog. And a killer dog like that is a danger to society. Mida Rabbi Natan, we learned this from Rabbi Natan. Ditanya, Rabbi Natan omer, minayin shelo yigdal adam kelev ra betoch beito. You shouldn't rear or bring up a bad dog in your house. Here, notice they differentiate between good dogs and bad dogs, but in general, dogs were not liked by the rabbis. And you can't leave a rickety, a ladder that's going to break in your house because somebody will climb up, fall, and die. It says, don't put blood in your house. In other words, don't do anything that might cause, this is a very interesting musari, ethical kind of dealing with ethics here at the very end of our chapter of saying you have to prevent, maybe it's also an allusion to the whole knas, that maybe it's preventative, that you can't leave people around who are menace to society, and can do terrible things. So, whether it's a dog, whether it's a ladder, or maybe rapists and seducers, that they're bad news to society, and our society needs to come up with ways to get, kill them, but try to make them First of all, making them settle down to marry this woman is supposed to be whether it will work or not, but it's supposed to keep them settled and not around raping other women. Again, whether that whole concept of marrying is so hard for us to understand. But anyway, I thought it was an interesting way to end the chapter. And with that, Hadran alach elu narot. And we're going to start the next mission of the fourth chapter. Nara shenit patita. If you have a woman who was seduced, boshta upigma uknasa shalavia. We learned this already. All the payments go to her father. Vatsar b'tfusa, and if she was, tfusa is another word for the one who was raped. If she was raped, then there's also the tsar payment that goes to the father. Amda b'din ad shalom ta'av. If she was stood up in court and was ruled on before the father died, harehin shalav. They're the fathers. In which case, meita'av. What if the father dies? Harehin shalachin. The money's already his, even though he didn't get it yet. So the money's going to go to the brothers, people who inherit him. Lois speak alamo b'din, but if she hasn't yet stood up for judgment, ad shemeita'av, and then the father died, then harehin shalatzma, then she gets them. It all depends on when the court rules. Amda b'din, if she stood up in judgment, ad shelo bagra, another case. Let's say she wasn't yet a bogeret. Then harein shalav, they go to the father. Meita'av, harein shalachim. So again, if the father dies, they go to the brothers. Lo speak alamo b'din ad shebagra, but if she was already mature by the time judgment happened, harein shalatzma, she gets it. It all depends on when they ruled. If the money went to the father and then he died, it's still the father's, and then it goes to the brothers. Rabbi Shimon disagrees. Rabbi Shimon omer, im lo espika ligvot ad shemeita'av. If she didn't collect the money, it's all about collection, and the father died, harehen shalatzma, they go to her. See later in the Gemara why this is, and we'll finish the last line of the Mishnah, which is already on Daf Mem Bet, in tomorrow's Shiur. Wishing everybody a good day.